Well, hello there. I'm the dull historian, and before I tell you about the mercury treatments, the wandering wombs, and the weasel testicles, you need to know this. In medieval England, the church created an actual flowchart to determine when married couples could have sex. 44 days per year, total, and yes, they kept track. Tonight, we're getting medieval, and I mean that in the most literal, uncomfortable, and absolutely fascinating way possible, because we're about to discover what sex was really like in medieval times. Spoiler alert, you wouldn't survive it, not because it was particularly athletic or adventurous, quite the opposite actually. You wouldn't survive the sheer awkwardness of having your entire village witness your wedding night, or the medical treatments that involve mercury in places mercury should never, ever go, or the dating advice that suggested throwing sweat-soaked apples at your crush. So settle in, grab that weighted blanket that would have blown a medieval peasant's mind, and let's time travel to an era where privacy was a foreign concept, bathing was surprisingly common, and the church ran the most profitable brothels in London. But first, if you're enjoying this journey into history's most intimate moments, consider subscribing. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I promise your location is infinitely more comfortable than a medieval bedchamber shared with livestock. Unless you're actually watching from a barn, in which case you're already getting the authentic experience. The year is 1347. You're 23 years old, unmarried, which makes you practically ancient by medieval standards, and you've just arrived in London. Not the London you know, with its underground trains and overpriced coffee. This is medieval London, where the Thames is simultaneously the city's water source, garbage disposal, and sewage system, where church bells dictate every moment of your day, where the smell hits you like a physical force, a potent mixture of unwashed bodies, rotting vegetables, human waste, and something mysteriously sweet that you'll later discover is the scent of bubonic plague. But you're not thinking about plague right now. You're thinking about love, or at least what passes for love in an era where marriages are business transactions and the church has literally created a flowchart to determine when married couples can have sex. Your father, a moderately successful wool merchant, has finally saved enough money to buy you a respectable marriage. That's right, buy. Like you're a particularly expensive sheep, which, given your father's profession, is probably exactly how he thinks of this transaction. The morning air is crisp, October cold, and you can see your breath as you make your way through the narrow streets. No Uber, no Google Maps, just you and your apparently terrible sense of direction in a city where streets have names like Grope Cunt Lane. Yes, that was a real street name. Multiple cities had them. Medieval people were refreshingly direct about certain things. You dodge a chamber pot being emptied from a second-story window, a daily hazard that makes you appreciate modern plumbing in ways you never thought possible. A merchant calls out, selling hot pies that smell suspiciously like they might contain actual meat, which in medieval London is about as likely as finding a unicorn. You pass a bathhouse where naked couples are visible through the steam, sharing wine and gossip in large wooden tubs. So much for the myth of the unwashed Middle Ages. St. Paul's Cathedral looms ahead, not the Christopher Wren masterpiece you might know, but its medieval predecessor. It's the social media of its day, where people come to see and be seen, make business deals, and apparently arrange marriages. The cathedral steps are crowded with merchants, pilgrims, prostitutes wearing their required yellow hoods, and young couples standing awkwardly next to negotiating parents. Your intended is easy to spot. The only person looking as uncomfortable as you feel, standing next to someone who is obviously their parent and clutching what appears to be a detailed financial document. Tall, reasonably clean, with most of their teeth and no visible boils. In medieval terms, they're basically a supermodel. The parents immediately launch into negotiations. Your father mentions your virtue approximately 17 times, which is medieval code for definitely a virgin, please pay full price. There's heated discussion about sheep. There's always heated discussion about sheep. Meanwhile, you and your intended stand there like particularly valuable livestock at auction, occasionally making eye contact and immediately looking away. A priest materializes, they have a talent for that, and begins listing the 47 days when married couples absolutely cannot have sex. Sundays are out, Wednesdays and Fridays too, all of Lent, most of Advent, feast days, saints' days, days ending in ye if the church is feeling particularly restrictive. You do the mental math and realise you're looking at maybe 44 days a year of church-approved marital relations. Your intended catches your eye with an expression that clearly says Tuesdays, and you have to bite your lip to keep from laughing. The negotiations conclude with a handshake between fathers. Contracts will be drawn up, banns will be read. In 6 weeks, you'll be married to this person you've known for exactly 45 minutes. Your wedding night will involve a ceremony called bedding, where drunk relatives will literally carry you both to bed, throw stockings at you, and possibly stick around to make sure you're doing it right. Medieval romance, where your marriage is a business transaction, your wedding night has an audience, and the church has more opinions about your sex life than your mother. As you leave St. Paul's, you pass those bathhouses again. The couples in the tubs look happy, sharing wine and gossip in their strange medieval version of a spa day. Steam rises from the water, mingling with smoke from nearby chimneys. This is London's dirty secret, or rather, its clean one. These bathhouses, these stews, are everywhere, and they're not just for bathing. You pass the famous brothels of Southwark, officially licensed by the Bishop of Winchester. Yes, you heard that right, the Bishop of Winchester runs brothels. The church that just spent 20 minutes listing when you can't have sex with your own spouse also operates what they delicately call houses of accommodation. The women who work there are known as Winchester geese, and the bishop takes his cut of every transaction. Apparently, the church contains multitudes. The streets are alive with the business of love, or at least its medieval approximation. Young couples sneak kisses in alleyways, defying every one of those 47 rules. A merchant's wife eyes a handsome blacksmith, while her husband argues about the price of wool. 2 young men share a look that would definitely earn them several lifetimes of penance if the church noticed. Love finds a way, even in 1347. But it's not all stolen glances and secret affairs. You pass an apothecary advertising remedies for women's troubles, code for either pregnancy prevention or unwanted pregnancy solutions. The window display includes mysterious herbs, suspiciously shaped roots, and what appears to be a dried weasel. Medieval birth control involves a lot of faith and even more weasels. Next door, a physician's sign promises cures for wandering wombs and excessive female hysteria. You don't know what a wandering womb is, but the treatment apparently involves sweet smells near your private parts and terrible smells near your nose. Medieval medical science is creative. A crowd has gathered around a street preacher who's describing in vivid detail exactly what happens to fornicators in hell. It involves a lot of fire, some very specific demons, and punishments that seem disproportionately focused on genitals. The crowd listens with rapt attention, including several people you just saw leaving the bathhouses. Medieval morality is complicated. As the day wears on, you find yourself thinking about your upcoming marriage. In 6 weeks, you'll stand before God and everyone you know and promise to love, honor, and obey someone you've met exactly once. Your wedding night will be a public spectacle. Your marital relations will be governed by more rules than a chess game. Any children you have will be business assets first, beloved offspring second. And yet, you remember that moment when your intended smiled, when you both realized the absurdity of the situation and shared that brief connection. Maybe that's enough. Maybe in a world where love is a luxury and privacy is non-existent, finding someone who can laugh at the same things you do is its own form of romance. The sun is setting now, painting London's crooked buildings in shades of gold and shadow. Church bells ring out across the city, vespers, calling the faithful to prayer. Tomorrow you'll return home to tell your mother about your intended. She'll want to know about their teeth, their property, their family connections. She won't ask if you like them. That's not how this works. But tonight, you're just another face in medieval London's crowded streets. Another person navigating the bizarre intersection of flesh and faith, desire and doctrine, love and law. Another human trying to find connection in a world that treats intimacy like a business transaction and still somehow expects you to produce an heir. Welcome to love in the Middle Ages, where your body belongs to your spouse belongs to their family, and everyone's sex life belongs to the church. Where medical science thinks your womb can wander off like a lost sheep. Where your wedding night entertainment is your drunk uncle offering helpful advice while you try to consummate your marriage. You wouldn't last a day, but then again, neither would anyone else from your time. And that's the point. These people, your ancestors, survived this. They found love in the midst of arranged marriages. They discovered pleasure despite the church's extensive rulebook. They raised families, built communities, and somehow managed to have enough sex to keep the human race going, even with only 44 approved days per year. They were tougher than you, more practical than you, and definitely more comfortable with public nudity than you. But they were also just people who wanted love, connection, and occasionally to have sex on a Tuesday without the church having an opinion about it. People who worried about pregnancy, disease, and whether their spouse would have all their teeth on the wedding day. People who weren't so different from you, really. They just had to navigate these very human desires in a world where privacy didn't exist, medical science was terrifying, and everyone was weirdly obsessed with sheep. The bells have stopped ringing. The city settles into its nighttime rhythm, quieter but never silent. Somewhere, couples are defying those 47 rules. Somewhere, the Bishop of Winchester is counting his brothel profits. Somewhere, a physician is preparing mercury treatments that will definitely make things worse. And somewhere, two people who met for 45 minutes on cathedral steps are thinking about each other, wondering if maybe, just maybe, this arranged marriage thing might work out after all. Medieval love. It's complicated, it's public, and it involves way more sheep than you'd expect. But it's still love, and that has to count for something. The morning after meeting your intended, you wake to the sound of church bells. Because of course you do. In medieval times, church bells are like that friend who won't stop texting. Constant, insistent, and impossible to ignore. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, compline. 8 times a day, those bells remind you that God is watching. And according to the church, He's particularly interested in what you're doing in bed. You stumble to the window of your family's modest merchant house, rubbing sleep from your eyes. The city is already alive with activity. Merchants setting up stalls, servants hauling water, and somewhere in the distance, a priest is definitely yelling about fornication. It's barely dawn, but medieval morality never sleeps. Your mother appears at your door, practically vibrating with questions about yesterday's meeting. She wants details: height, teeth count, visible diseases, family connections, sheep holdings, the important things. You mention that your intended seem nice, and she looks at you like you've started speaking ancient Sumerian. Nice? What does nice have to do with marriage? But we'll get to your marriage soon enough. First, you need to understand exactly what you're signing up for, because the medieval church has opinions about sex. So many opinions. They've literally created a flowchart, an actual historical flowchart, to help priests determine whether a married couple's intimate moment is sinful or not. Picture this. It's your wedding night. You've survived the public bedding ceremony. Your drunk relatives have finally left, and you're alone with your new spouse for the first time. Romance is in the air, and then you remember the rules. First question on the church's helpful flowchart. Is it a holy day? There are approximately 180 of those per year, so odds aren't in your favour. Is it Lent? That's 40 days right there. Advent? Another 20 to 40 days, depending on how strict your local bishop feels. Is it a Sunday? Absolutely not. Wednesday? Forbidden. Friday? Are you insane? Saturday? Debatable, but probably no. But wait, there's more. Are you trying to have sex during daylight hours? Shameful. Is your wife menstruating? Forbidden, and somehow you're supposed to know this, despite the fact that discussing such things is also considered improper. Is she pregnant? Congratulations, but no more intimacy for you. Recently gave birth? 40 days of prohibition, minimum. Some dioceses push it to 60, just to be safe. The position restrictions are where things get truly absurd. Only missionary position is sanctioned by the church. Everything else is considered unnatural and will result in deformed children, demonic possession, or worse, a really awkward confession next Sunday. One 13th century theologian, Albert the Great, actually ranked sexual positions by their level of sinfulness. Missionary? Barely acceptable. Woman on top? Mortal sin. Anything more creative? Don't even think about it. And speaking of thinking about it, that's a sin too. Lustful thoughts about your own spouse? Sinful. Enjoying marital relations too much? Extremely sinful. One medieval priest wrote that a husband who loved his wife too ardently was committing adultery with her. The mental gymnastics required to make marriage itself a form of cheating would impress even modern Twitter. But here's where it gets interesting. The same church that created this labyrinth of sexual restrictions also believed that women needed regular orgasms for their health. No, really. Medieval medical texts, many written by monks and clerics, insisted that women who didn't achieve sexual satisfaction would suffer from womb fury or uterine suffocation. The symptoms included fainting, seizures, and general hysteria. The cure? Exactly what you think. This created a paradox that would make philosophers weep. Sex is sinful, but denying your wife sexual pleasure might kill her. Enjoying sex is wrong, but not enjoying it enough is medically dangerous. The solution, according to one helpful theologian, was to approach marital relations with the same enthusiasm you'd bring to taking medicine. Necessary, beneficial, but definitely not fun. The penalties for breaking these rules ranged from amusing to life-destroying. Minor infractions might earn you a few days of fasting on bread and water. Major ones could result in years of penance. And if you were caught engaging in what one medieval text delicately called the sin that cannot be named, oral sex, you were looking at 7 years of penance. Although, hilariously, some priests noted that since the first offence earned the maximum penalty, repeat offenders couldn't technically be punished more. A loophole that definitely wasn't intentional, but probably got exploited. Your local priest is supposed to enforce all these rules, which leads to some of history's most uncomfortable conversations. Imagine confession in 1347. You kneel in the dark wooden confessional, trying to explain to Father Thomas, who's known you since birth, that you accidentally had impure thoughts about your own wife on a Tuesday. He sighs, assigns you 3 days of fasting, and reminds you that Tuesdays are for contemplating Christ's suffering, not your spouse's ankles. But Father Thomas has his own problems, because while he's lecturing you about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of sexual restraint, his boss, the bishop, is counting profits from the 18 brothels he runs in Southwark. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. The same church that forbids married couples from having sex on most days of the year is simultaneously running a profitable prostitution empire. The justification for this ecclesiastical side hustle comes from none other than St. Thomas Aquinas, who compared prostitution to a palace sewage system. Remove it, and the whole place becomes uninhabitable. Better to contain the filth in one place than let it spread everywhere. It's pragmatic, hypocritical, and quintessentially medieval. The Bishop of Winchester's brothels, and yes, that's the official Bishop of Winchester, not some rogue priest with entrepreneurial spirit, operated under strict regulations. The women, known as Winchester geese, had to wear specific clothing, couldn't work on holy days, at least the church was consistent, and were forbidden from accepting married men as clients. Although how anyone verified marital status in an age before photo ID remains a mystery. These brothels generated massive profits. We're talking serious money here. Enough to build churches, fund monasteries, and keep bishops in the lifestyle to which they'd become accustomed. The irony of funding religious buildings with sex work revenue apparently escaped no one and bothered no one. Medieval morality was flexible when money was involved. Meanwhile, you're still trying to figure out when you can legally consummate your upcoming marriage. Your wedding is in 5 weeks, which means it'll probably fall on a feast day, because medieval calendars are cursed like that. Even if it doesn't, you'll need to avoid the vigil before the wedding, obviously, the day of the wedding, too exciting, and possibly the day after, too exhausting. Your intended sends a letter, actual correspondence. How scandalous, mentioning they've been studying the calendar to find appropriate days for marital duties. The fact that you need to schedule intimacy like a business meeting would be depressing if it weren't. So absurd. You write back suggesting the second Tuesday after the wedding, assuming it's not Saint whoever's feast day and the moon isn't doing anything theologically problematic. But here's the thing about all these rules. Nobody could actually follow them, not even the priests who preached them. The same historical records that preserve these elaborate restrictions also record countless violations. Baptismal records show babies born 9 months after Lent. Court documents detail couples caught in compromising positions on Sundays. Even monastery records hint at impressive amounts of rule-breaking within their supposedly celibate walls. The truth is, medieval people were just as human as we are. They had desires, needs, and a remarkable ability to rationalize their way around inconvenient religious restrictions. Yes, the church said sex on Sunday was a sin, but surely God would understand if it had been 3 weeks since the last approved day and your spouse was looking particularly fetching in candlelight. This constant negotiation between religious law and human nature created a culture of creative compliance. Couples developed elaborate justifications for their behavior. Maybe they weren't actually enjoying it, thus avoiding the sin of lust. Maybe they were only doing it for procreation, the only approved reason. Maybe they forgot what day it was. Medieval calendars were complicated. Priests, faced with the impossible task of enforcing unenforceable rules, developed their own flexible interpretations. Father Thomas might officially condemn all non-procreative sex, but he's not going to ask too many questions if your third child looks suspiciously like it was conceived during Advent. He's got bigger problems, like explaining why the bishop's brothel revenues are funding the new church roof. The medical establishment added another layer of complexity. While the church preached restraint, doctors, many of them clergy, warned that too much sexual abstinence could be deadly. Men might develop seed backup, leading to madness. Women faced the aforementioned wandering wombs. Even celibate monks and nuns were advised to seek medical relief if their health demanded it, though what exactly that entailed was left diplomatically vague. This created a society where everyone was simultaneously obsessed with sex and terrified of it, where the rules were so complex that breaking them was inevitable, where the same institution condemning sexual pleasure was profiting from it, where medical science and religious doctrine were in constant, hilarious conflict. And in the middle of all this stands you, 5 weeks away from a marriage that will be governed by more regulations than international trade agreements. You've started having stress dreams about accidentally touching your spouse on a feast day. Your mother has helpfully provided a calendar marking all the forbidden days in red. It looks like someone murdered Christmas. But you're also starting to realize something important. Everyone else is just as confused as you are. Your married cousins drop hints about creative calendar interpretation. Your aunt mentions that babies conceived on forbidden days are often the healthiest. Even the priest seems exhausted by the whole system, rushing through the marital restrictions during pre-wedding counselling, like he's reading terms and conditions nobody expects you to actually follow. The system is impossible. Everyone knows it's impossible, but it persists because medieval society runs on the collective agreement to pretend things make sense even when they absolutely don't. It's like a massive game of sexual Simon Says, where the rules change constantly and everyone's cheating but pretending they're not. Your intended writes again. They found 3 possible days in your first month of marriage that aren't explicitly forbidden. Assuming, of course, that you're not struck by sudden illness, unexpected holy days, or spontaneous religious guilt. You write back, suggesting you just play it by ear and hope God has a sense of humour. 5 weeks to go, 180 forbidden days to navigate, a lifetime of theological loopholes to exploit. Medieval marriage, where the real intimacy is finding someone who's equally baffled by the rules. 4 weeks before your wedding, you develop a concerning cough. Nothing serious, just a tickle in your throat that won't go away. But this is medieval England, where a cough could mean anything from dusty air to impending death, so your mother insists on calling the physician. Dr. Wilhelm arrives carrying a leather satchel that smells like a combination of herbs, sulphur, and existential dread. He's one of London's most respected medical minds, which means he's read all the latest texts from Baghdad, studied at the University of Paris, and firmly believes your uterus is capable of independent travel. That's right. According to medieval medical science, if you're a woman, your womb isn't just a reproductive organ. It's a sentient creature with its own agenda, capable of detaching from its designated spot and wandering around your body like a tourist who's lost their map. This isn't some fringe theory promoted by village hedge witches. This is mainstream medical consensus, taught at universities and written in textbooks that cost more than your entire dowry. The good doctor examines your throat, checks your pulse, and then asks your mother to leave the room. This is concerning. He leans in with the grave expression of someone about to deliver devastating news. "Tell me," he says in hushed tones, "when did you last experience the marital act?" You remind him that you're not married yet. The wedding is in 4 weeks. You've been very clear about this. He nods sagely. Ah, then that explains everything. Your womb, deprived of its natural sustenance, has begun to wander. It's probably lodged somewhere near your throat, causing the cough. You stare at him. He stares back, completely serious. According to Dr. Wilhelm and every medical authority from Hippocrates to Hildegard of Bingen, the female womb is essentially a hungry animal that feeds on male seed. Deprived of this essential nutrition, it detaches from its moorings and goes searching for sustenance elsewhere in the body. When it travels upward, it causes choking, fainting, and hysteria. When it moves downward, it causes leg problems. When it shifts sideways, well, that's how you get possessed by demons. The treatment for your wandering womb is both hilarious and horrifying. First, Dr. Wilhelm produces a collection of vials containing the foulest substances known to medieval medicine. Asafoetida, burnt leather, and something that smells suspiciously like rotting fish. These are to be held near your nose. The theory is that the womb, being a sensitive creature, will be repelled by the stench and flee downward. Next, he prescribes sweet-smelling substances to be placed near your lower regions: rose oil, musk, and amber. The womb, attracted by these pleasant scents, will hopefully return to its proper position, like a cat being lured by treats. But the most effective cure, he explains with medical authority, is regular sexual intercourse. The womb needs its proper feeding to stay in place. Since you're not yet married, he suggests medical manipulation by a skilled practitioner, basically a medieval prescription for exactly what you think it is. Your mother would faint if she knew what the good doctor was suggesting. This isn't just about wandering wombs, though. Medieval medical understanding of human sexuality is a fascinating mixture of surprisingly accurate observations and completely unhinged theories. Take, for instance, the medical consensus on conception. Doctors believed, correctly, that both partners needed to achieve climax for pregnancy to occur. The logic was wrong. They thought female seed mixed with male seed. But the practical result was that medieval medical texts are surprisingly focused on female pleasure. Hildegard of Bingen, the 12th century abbess, mystic, and medical writer, penned some of the most explicit descriptions of human sexuality in medieval literature. And remember, this is a nun writing this. She described female orgasm as heat in the brain that descends through the body, creating pleasure and releasing female seed. She wrote about different types of male and female sexual temperaments, with the clinical detachment of someone documenting plant species. According to Hildegard, there were hot women and cold women, hot men and cold men, and the various combinations produced different results. A hot woman with a cold man would have sickly children. A cold woman with a hot man would have daughters. Two hot people together would have sons but risk burning each other out with their passion. It was like medieval astrology, but for genitals. The medical texts get even more specific. The Trotula, a collection of women's medical knowledge from 12th century Salerno, includes detailed instructions for enhancing sexual pleasure, tightening vaginas that are too wide, their words not mine, and dealing with excessive sexual desire. The treatments range from practical, herbal baths, to bizarre fumigation with the smoke of burned elephant dung. Men's sexual health wasn't ignored either. Medieval physicians were deeply concerned about the build-up of unused seed in celibate men. Too much retention could lead to blindness, madness, and death. One medical text solemnly recounts the tale of a monk who desired a woman 70 times before morning prayers and subsequently died with a brain shrunk to the size of a pomegranate. The moral of the story was unclear. Was it that lust kills, or that suppressing lust kills? Medieval medicine hedged its bets. Your physician, meanwhile, is still prescribing treatments for your wandering womb. He suggests sleeping with your feet elevated to prevent upward womb migration. He recommends avoiding strong emotions, as these can agitate the womb into movement. He prescribes a daily fumigation ritual involving sitting over a pot of boiling herbs while wrapped in heavy blankets. The herbs include fennel, cumin, and something called maiden's breath, which you're pretty sure he just made up. But here's where medieval medicine gets truly wild: the contraception methods. Because while the Church condemned any attempt to prevent pregnancy, medical texts are full of detailed birth control instructions. It's almost like medieval people didn't want 15 children. Shocking. The contraceptive methods range from potentially effective to definitely lethal. On the reasonable end, women used sea sponges soaked in vinegar or lemon juice as barrier methods. Hippocrates recommended jumping backwards 7 times after intercourse to dislodge the seed. Queen Anne's lace seeds, consumed daily, actually do have contraceptive properties. Modern science has confirmed this. But then there were the more creative solutions. Wearing an amulet made from a weasel's testicles, removed while the animal was still alive, for maximum effectiveness. Drinking water that blacksmiths used to cool their tools, hello, lead poisoning. Inserting crocodile dung mixed with honey, ancient Egyptian in origin, somehow still recommended in medieval Europe, despite the distinct lack of local crocodiles. One particularly optimistic method involved the woman holding her breath during intercourse, then sitting with her knees crossed afterward while sneezing exactly 9 times. Another suggested wearing the right foot of a weasel around the neck. Just the right foot. The left foot would make you more fertile. Weasels, apparently, were very important to medieval reproductive health. Your physician adds his own contraceptive advice to your premarital consultation, speaking in medical euphemisms that fool no one. He mentions that certain herbs, taken in tea form, can regulate the female courses and prevent excessive fertility. He's talking about pennyroyal, rue, and savin, all abortifacients that could indeed prevent or end pregnancy, along with potentially ending the woman's life. Medieval birth control was not for the faint of heart. The most bizarre medical belief might be the connection between orgasms and conception. Since doctors believed female climax was necessary for pregnancy, this created a horrifying legal precedent. If a woman became pregnant from rape, courts often concluded she must have experienced pleasure and therefore consented. The medical establishment had literally created a framework where pregnancy was proof of enjoyment. The fact that stressed, traumatized women often didn't conceive only reinforced this terrible logic. 3 weeks before your wedding now, and your cough has mysteriously disappeared. Dr. Wilhelm credits his fumigation treatment. You credit the fact that London's air has temporarily shifted from toxic to merely unpleasant. But he's not done with his premarital medical advice. He pulls out a thick manuscript filled with anatomical drawings that look like they were created by someone who had never actually seen human bodies, but had heard descriptions from a drunk friend. According to these illustrations, the female reproductive system includes a 7-chambered uterus, 3 chambers for boys, 3 for girls, 1 for hermaphrodites, ovaries that produce female seed, and various tubes and passages that seem to violate the laws of physics. The male anatomy fares no better in these texts. Sperm is described as distilled blood, refined through multiple organs until it achieves its potent white form. The testicles are portrayed as complex factories with different sections for different aspects of seed production. One medical text seriously argues that the right testicle produces male children while the left creates females, leading to the horrifying practice of men tying off one side or the other to influence their offspring's sex. Your physician now moves on to marital health advice. For optimal conception, he recommends specific positions, missionary, obviously, particular times, morning, when the seed is freshest, and dietary requirements, hot foods for cold wombs, cold foods for hot wombs. He suggests your husband eat plenty of eggs, sparrows, notoriously lusty birds, and carrots. Yes, the shape thing goes back that far. For your part, you should consume warming foods like ginger and cinnamon if your womb runs cold, or cooling foods like lettuce and cucumber if it runs hot. How do you know your womb's temperature? Excellent question. Apparently, it involves checking the colour of your menstrual blood, the texture of your cervical mucus, and whether you prefer red wine or white. Medieval medicine, making everything unnecessarily complicated since the 5th century. The consultation concludes with Dr. Wilhelm prescribing a pre-wedding regimen to ensure your womb is properly positioned and prepared for marriage. This includes daily fumigations, specific sleeping positions, avoiding cold foods, and absolutely no strong emotions. He also provides a pot of mysterious salve to be applied to your woman's parts nightly to ensure proper elasticity and receptiveness. You pay him an absurd amount of money for what amounts to medically prescribed perfume placement and dietary restrictions. As he leaves, he mentions that he'll be available for post-wedding consultations if you experience any womb fury or seed retention issues. The fact that you'll need medical supervision for your sex life is just another delightful aspect of medieval marriage. 2 weeks and 6 days until your wedding. Your womb has apparently stopped its wandering and settled back home. Your cough is gone. You've learned more about medieval reproductive theories than any modern person should know, and you're starting to understand why medieval people were simultaneously obsessed with sex and terrified of their own bodies. When your body contains sentient organs, when your brain can shrink from excessive lust, when your very anatomy is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in completely wrong medical theories, is it any wonder that medieval sexuality was so complicated? Your intended writes another letter mentioning they've been consulting their own physician about proper marital health. Apparently, men need to be careful not to expend too much seed at once, as it could drain their life force. They've been prescribed strengthening foods and told to avoid hot baths before the wedding. You both, it seems, are receiving medieval sex education. It's confidently wrong, occasionally dangerous, and somehow still more comprehensive than what many modern people receive. At least medieval doctors acknowledged that women's pleasure mattered, even if they thought it was necessary for conception rather than just basic human decency. The wedding approaches. Your womb remains mercifully stationary. And somewhere in London, Dr. Wilhelm is probably prescribing burnt elephant dung to another confused bride-to-be. Your wedding day has arrived, and with it, the dawning realization that medieval marriage ceremonies are less about sacred unions and more about public theatre with audience participation. The morning begins at an ungodly hour because apparently God prefers his marriages served before breakfast. You're dressed in your finest clothes, not white, because white signifies mourning, and also because you're not wealthy enough to own clothes. You'll only wear once. Blue is the colour of purity in 1347, so you're wearing a blue kirtle that cost more than most people's houses. Your hair is loose and flowing, a symbol of virginity that everyone pretends to believe, even though half the brides in London are visibly pregnant under their blue gowns. The church is packed, not because you're particularly popular, but because medieval weddings are free entertainment in an era before Netflix. Your father looks pleased. The financial negotiations are complete, the contracts signed. Your mother is crying, though whether from emotion or relief that she's finally marrying off her 23-year-old spinster daughter is unclear. Your intended, soon to be your spouse, stands at the altar looking exactly as nervous as you feel. They're wearing their best doublet, freshly cleaned for the occasion, which means it only smells slightly of sweat and wool, romance at its finest. The ceremony itself is surprisingly brief. Medieval priests have things to do, and spending hours on one wedding isn't profitable. Vows are exchanged, rings blessed, and suddenly you're married. The transformation from single to married takes less time than your morning fumigation treatment for wandering womb prevention. But the real event hasn't started yet, because now comes the feast, and more importantly, what comes after the feast, the bedding ceremony. The blessed, cursed, absolutely unavoidable bedding ceremony. The wedding feast takes place in your father's guild hall, because nothing says romance like the place where wool merchants argue about sheep prices. Long tables groan under the weight of food that would horrify modern health inspectors. Roasted capons swim in their own grease. Meat pies contain things that might be meat, might be vegetables, might be last week's leftovers, creatively repurposed. The wedding cake is less cake and more architectural marvel made of hardened sugar paste and good intentions. Your new spouse sits beside you at the high table, and you're both trying to eat while dozens of relatives make increasingly inappropriate jokes about the night ahead. Your uncle, deep in his cups before noon, loudly speculates about your ability to produce heirs. Your cousin offers helpful advice about conception positions. Your grandmother, who you thought was deaf, turns out to hear perfectly well when she wants to, and contributes her own terrifying memories of her wedding night in graphic detail. The feast continues for hours. Medieval weddings operate on the principle that you can't send a couple to bed until everyone is too drunk to remember what happens next. Wine flows like water, ale flows like wine, and something called bride ale flows like a threat. This special wedding brew is stronger than normal ale, sweeter than wine, and guaranteed to make terrible decisions seem reasonable. Musicians play, though play is a generous description of the sounds emerging from their instruments. Medieval music at its best sounds like cats fighting. Medieval music performed by drunk wedding musicians sounds like cats fighting while on fire. But everyone dances anyway, because the alternative is sitting still and thinking about what's coming. And what's coming is the bedding ceremony. The sun is setting, and the moment everyone has been waiting for, and you've been dreading, is finally here. It starts innocently enough. Someone shouts, "To bed, to bed," and suddenly the entire wedding party is on their feet. This isn't a suggestion, this is a mob action. your female relatives surround you, while the men grab your new husband. What follows is essentially a medieval striptease, but with significantly less coordination and considerably more shouting. The women pull you toward the wedding chamber, singing songs that would make modern bachelorette parties blush. Medieval women, it turns out, have extensive repertoires of filthy songs, saved specifically for this moment. They sing about ploughing fields, sowing seeds, and various agricultural metaphors that fool absolutely no one. Your aunt, who you've never heard say anything stronger than "fie," is leading a chorus about a blacksmith's mighty hammer. Meanwhile, the men are subjecting your spouse to similar treatment. You can hear them through the walls, singing about swords and sheaths, lances and targets, and other military metaphors that demonstrate medieval people's commitment to turning everything into innuendo. The wedding chamber has been prepared with all the romance of a medical procedure. The bed is freshly made with new linens, expensive ones, because these sheets will be inspected tomorrow for proof of virginity. Herbs are scattered on the floor for fertility and to mask the smell of drunk relatives. Candles provide mood lighting, assuming your mood is mildly terrified. The women strip you down to your chemise, while offering advice that ranges from practical to psychologically scarring. Your mother, suddenly overcome with maternal duty, attempts to explain the facts of life. She's about 15 years too late, and her euphemisms are so vague you're not entirely sure she knows what she's talking about. Your married cousins are more helpful, though their enthusiasm for detail makes you wonder if they're trying to help or just enjoying your mortification. Then comes the processional to the bed. You're carried, literally carried, by your female relatives, while they continue their agricultural singing. Your new spouse is similarly transported by the men. You're both deposited in the bed, like sacrificial offerings to the gods of matrimony. But it's not over. Oh no, now comes the fun part. The priest arrives to bless the bed, because nothing sets the mood like a celibate man in robes sprinkling holy water on your marriage bed while muttering in Latin. He blesses the four corners of the bed, the couple in the bed, and probably the bed frame itself. Medieval priests are thorough when it comes to blessing things. The relatives are supposed to leave now. Supposed to. But this is where regional variations make things interesting. In some parts of England, the party continues in the wedding chamber. Guests sit on benches around the bed, drinking and offering helpful commentary. In Germany, the tradition is even worse. Guests bang drums and sing outside the door to cover any sounds from within, because medieval people understood that nothing helps nervous newlyweds relax like percussion accompaniment. Your particular wedding follows the London tradition, which involves the throwing of the stockings. Yes, stockings. Your wedding guests, now thoroughly drunk, take turns throwing your stockings at you while you sit in bed trying to maintain some dignity. If a stocking lands on you, it means the thrower will be married within the year. It's like a bouquet toss, but somehow worse. The stocking throwing continues for what feels like hours. Your uncle's aim improves with alcohol consumption. Your cousin manages to hit your spouse in the face 3 times. Someone's child, who shouldn't even be here, throws a shoe instead of a stocking, and no one corrects them. Finally, mercifully, someone suggests the couple needs privacy. But even this isn't simple. The guests file out slowly, each offering final pieces of advice. "Remember to keep your feet elevated," shouts Dr. Wilhelm, who apparently attends all his patients' weddings. "Think of England," suggests someone who clearly doesn't understand geography or biology. "The seed needs warmth," your aunt calls out, though what you're supposed to do with that information remains unclear. The door closes. You're alone with your spouse for the first time since exchanging vows. The silence is deafening after hours of chaos, You can hear the wedding party continuing outside. They'll be there all night, drinking and occasionally shouting encouragement through the door. Your spouse looks at you. You look at them. You're both wearing thin linen undergarments, sitting in a bed that's been blessed by a priest, surrounded by fertility herbs, with your entire extended family listening outside. Romance is officially dead. But then your spouse says something that makes you laugh. Maybe it's about your uncle's stocking aim. Maybe it's about the priest accidentally blessing the chamber pot. Maybe it's just acknowledging the absurdity of starting a marriage like this. Whatever it is, the tension breaks. Outside, the party continues. Someone starts another agricultural song. Your uncle is definitely going to feel that bride ale tomorrow. But inside the wedding chamber, two people are trying to navigate the impossible space between public expectation and private intimacy. The bedding ceremony isn't over though, because tomorrow morning, the bloody sheets will need to be displayed as proof of consummation and virginity. Your female relatives will inspect them like forensic investigators. The sheets will be hung from windows, shown to witnesses, possibly preserved as family heirlooms. Nothing says, happily ever after, like your aunt examining your bedsheets for biological evidence. Some couples, aware of this horrifying tradition, come prepared. Chicken blood is the traditional substitute for brides who might not bleed for any number of reasons. One of your married cousins quietly slipped you a small vial during the undressing, whispering, just in case. The fact that faking virginity is so common there's a standard procedure speaks volumes about medieval sexuality. The pressure to perform is enormous, not just to consummate the marriage, but to do so in a way that produces the expected evidence. Never mind that not all women bleed their first time. Never mind that stress and alcohol might make things difficult. Never mind that having your entire family waiting outside is the opposite of an aphrodisiac. The show must go on. Some couples can't handle the pressure. Historical records include cases where marriages were annulled because consummation failed on the wedding night. The court procedures for these cases are exactly as mortifying as you'd expect. Witnesses testify about what they heard or didn't hear. Wise women are called to examine the couple for physical defects. In extreme cases, the couple might be required to attempt consummation again in front of witnesses to prove inability. But those are tomorrow's problems. Tonight, you're just two people in a blessed bed, trying to start a marriage while your drunk relatives sing increasingly creative verses about ploughing. Your spouse reaches for your hand, and it's awkward and sweet, and nothing like the romantic stories the troubadours sing. Medieval romance, where your wedding night is a public event, your relatives are the soundtrack, and tomorrow your sheets will be examined by committee. The candles burn lower, the singing outside grows softer as guests succumb to bride ale, and somewhere in this chaos of tradition and expectation, two people try to find each other. It's not the wedding night you would have chosen. It's certainly not the one you'll tell your children about, but it's yours, witnesses and all. Tomorrow you'll face the sheet inspection, the knowing looks, the crude jokes about whether the field has been properly ploughed. Tomorrow you'll begin navigating married life with its 44 approved days and extensive rulebook. Tomorrow you'll discover what kind of person you've actually married beyond their ability to survive a bedding ceremony. But tonight you're just trying to consummate a marriage while pretending your entire family isn't listening outside. Welcome to married life in medieval England, where privacy is a foreign concept and intimacy comes with an audience. At least the priest blessed the bed. That has to count for something. 2 weeks into married life, and you're starting to understand why medieval people wrote so many songs about adultery. Not because you're planning anything. The penalties for adultery range from public humiliation to death, depending on your gender and social status. But because actual romance, the kind troubadours sing about, has absolutely nothing to do with marriage. Your days have settled into a routine. Your spouse leaves early for their work, merchant business, guild meetings, the endless medieval bureaucracy of making money. You manage the household, which in 1347 means supervising servants you can barely afford, checking that the beer hasn't gone too sour, and pretending you know how to run a home when your mother did everything until 2 weeks ago. Love doesn't enter into it. This is a business partnership with mandatory sexual duties and the expectation of heirs. The fact that you actually like your spouse, their sense of humour survived the bedding ceremony, which is more than most couples can say, is a pleasant bonus, not a requirement. But walk through London's streets and you'll see romance everywhere, just not between married people. Take, for instance, the elaborate courtship ritual happening right now in your neighbour's garden. Young Lord William, not your spouse, different William, medieval England has about 5 names total, is standing beneath Lady Margaret's window, holding a lute he clearly can't play. He's attempting to sing a love song he definitely wrote himself, judging by how none of the verses scan properly. Lady Margaret is married. Lord William is married. Neither of their spouses is involved in this performance. But this isn't adultery, not technically. This is courtly love, and it operates by completely different rules than marriage. The concept arrived from southern France, with Eleanor of Aquitaine and her troubadours, and it's turned the English nobility into poetry spouting, flower throwing, emotional disasters. The rules are specific. A knight chooses a lady, usually married, always unattainable, and dedicates his life to serving her. He performs great deeds in her name, writes terrible poetry in her honour, and pines dramatically from a respectful distance. The lady, for her part, may acknowledge his devotion with small favours, a handkerchief, a sleeve, on very special occasions, a lock of hair. These tokens are treated like holy relics. Lord William probably has a shrine to Lady Margaret's glove somewhere. Physical consummation would actually ruin the whole thing. Courtly love is about the suffering, the yearning, the exquisite pain of unconsummated desire. It's basically emotional masochism with better fashion choices. You watch Lord William butcher another verse. Something about Lady Margaret's eyes being like spheres of heaven, which is both astronomically incorrect and deeply unromantic, and wonder how this became the ideal of love. Your spouse appears beside you, also watching the performance. 3rd time this week, they mutter. You'd think he'd learn the chords by now. This is your romance, standing together, mocking the neighbours. It's not what the songs describe, but it's surprisingly comfortable. The marriage customs of your social class. Merchant families with pretensions to gentility are positively progressive compared to the nobility. At least you met your spouse before the wedding. Noble marriages are pure political theatre. Isabella of France was betrothed to Richard II at age 6. He was 23. The wedding happened when she was 7, though everyone insists the marriage wasn't consummated until she reached the ripe old age of 12. Child brides are disturbingly common among the aristocracy. The church sets the age of consent at 12 for girls, 14 for boys, but betrothal can happen in infancy. These children are traded like particularly valuable livestock, their marriages, sealing alliances, and transferring property. Your cousin works in a noble household and shares horrifying stories. Lady Eleanor, married at 13 to a man in his 40s, still plays with dolls. Lord Thomas, age 15, was wedded to a widow twice his age because she owned significant lands. The children produced by these unions are often raised by nurses, while their child mothers are prepared for the next pregnancy. But even adult noble marriages are transactions first, relationships never. The dowry negotiations make your father's sheep obsession look restrained. Catherine of Aragon brought 200,000 scudos to her marriage with Prince Arthur. When he died, she was passed to his younger brother like a piece of furniture that came with the house. Love in these marriages is not just unexpected, it's actively discouraged. A husband who loves his wife too much might be influenced by her. A wife who loves her husband might forget her duty to her birth family. Better to keep things businesslike, with affection reserved for mistresses, courtly love interests, and anyone except your actual spouse. The middle classes, your class, at least have the possibility of affection. Your parents probably didn't love each other at first, but 30 years of sharing a business, a bed, and 7 children, 5 surviving, has created something like partnership. They bicker constantly, but work together smoothly. It's not romance, but it's real. The lower classes, paradoxically, have the most freedom in marriage. When you have nothing, there's nothing to negotiate. Peasants often marry for actual compatibility, though their lord's permission is still required. Of course, they pay for this freedom with fees. Merchant for permission to marry, lairwhite for premarital sex, childwhite for bastards. The lord profits either way. You've heard stories of peasant weddings that sound almost romantic. Hand-fasting ceremonies where couples hold hands and jump over a broom. Marriages under the greenwood tree, with only nature as witness. Some don't marry at all in the church sense, just declare themselves wed and start living together. When the priest eventually finds out, he'll fine them and perform a retroactive blessing, grumbling about proper procedures while pocketing his fee. Your own marriage falls somewhere in the murky middle, arranged but not forced, financially motivated but not purely mercenary. You're developing something like affection for your spouse, who turns out to have hidden depths. They know all the words to those filthy tavern songs. They can juggle, badly. They actually listen when you talk, which is more than most husbands manage. But is it love? Not the way the troubadours describe it. There's no pining, no suffering, no elaborate metaphors about roses and thorns. You don't write poetry about their eyes, or threaten to die without their favour. You just get along. Share jokes. Navigate the bizarre rules of medieval marriage together. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to be someone's courtly love, to inspire terrible poetry and off-key serenades, to have knights dedicate their tournament victories to you, to be idealised and worshipped from afar. Then Lord William hits a particularly sour note on his lute, and Lady Margaret's husband emerges to dump a chamber pot from the window, accidentally dousing the would-be troubadour. Your spouse snorts with laughter, and you realise you prefer this. The comfortable conspiracy of marriage over the dramatic performance of courtly love. The gift-giving traditions of courtship reveal medieval creativity within constraints. Noble ladies in courtly love arrangements might give their admirers sleeves. Detachable sleeves were fashion and function combined. These could be worn, displayed, or clutched dramatically during tournaments. One knight reportedly wore 7 different sleeves from 7 different ladies, which seems logistically challenging and emotionally exhausting. For actual couples, gifts were more practical, but still symbolic. Love spoons carved with initials and hearts, gloves that carried the owner's scent, apples that had been carried against the skin, a particularly intimate gift in an era before deodorant. Your spouse once gave you a small knife, which sounds threatening, but was actually romantic. A knife meant they trusted you, valued your partnership in the household, and thought you deserved good steel. The strangest tradition might be the love potions. Every wise woman, herb seller, and questionable physician offers them. The ingredients usually include herbs, like vervain and mandrake, but also things like powdered pearls, expensive, hare's blood, messy, and the dried heart of a dove, disturbing. Whether they work depends entirely on what you mean by work. They certainly don't create love, but they might create interesting, digestive experiences. Your neighbour tried one last month. She wanted her husband to pay more attention to her instead of his mistress. The potion, purchased at great expense from a love doctor, contained what claimed to be unicorn horn, but was probably narwhal tusk, mixed with wine and her own monthly blood. Her husband drank it unknowingly, spent 3 days violently ill, and now avoids both his wife and his mistress. So perhaps it worked after all. The reality of love in medieval England is that it exists in the spaces between rules, in the moments when arranged marriages accidentally produce affection, in the servant girl who runs away with the baker's apprentice, consequences be damned, in the widow who refuses remarriage because she actually loved her first husband, in the elderly couple at market who still hold hands, 50 years after their families negotiated their union like a grain sale. Even the nobility, with their elaborate courtly love performances, occasionally stumble into real feeling. Edward III actually loved his wife Philippa. They had 13 children together, and when she died, he reportedly never recovered. Richard II loved Anne of Bohemia so deeply that when she died, he had their palace demolished because he couldn't bear the memories. These love stories stand out precisely because they're exceptional. Most marriages plod along as business arrangements with varying degrees of affection or antipathy. But humans are humans, and love finds a way even in systems designed to exclude it. Your spouse returns home as the sun sets, tired from a day of merchant negotiations. They bring you a small gift, ribbons from the market, nothing expensive, but in colours they know you like. It's not the stuff of songs. No one will write epic poems about ribbons purchased on the way home from work. But they remembered you in the middle of their day, thought of what might make you smile, used their limited funds on something purely to please you. In the grand spectrum of medieval romance, from political marriages to courtly love theatrics, this small gesture feels revolutionary. You tie a ribbon in your hair. They smile. Neither of you mentions love. That's for nobles with too much time and troubadours with terrible lute skills. You have dinner to prepare, accounts to reconcile, a household to run. But when Lord William starts his evening serenade, he's moved on to comparing Lady Margaret to various agricultural products. You and your spouse share a look of mutual amusement. Your marriage might be a business arrangement sanctioned by the church and witnessed by drunk relatives, but at least you're in it together. Medieval love, where the real romance is finding someone who thinks the same things are ridiculous. 3 months into marriage, and you've discovered something that would shock your future descendants. Medieval people are absolutely obsessed with being clean. Not just regular clean, competitively, aggressively, socially mandated clean. The idea that your ancestors wallowed in filth for 1,000 years is a lie, started by Renaissance snobs who needed to feel superior about their new classical architecture. Your morning begins, as always, with washing. Face, hands, teeth. Yes, teeth. You use a rough cloth and a mixture of salt and herbs to scrub them. Your spouse prefers a chew stick made from marshmallow root, which they gnaw thoughtfully while reviewing the household accounts. Everyone has their own dental routine, their own special mixtures. Your mother swears by crushed mint and chalk. Your neighbour uses ground sage and wine. Nobody's teeth are perfect. Sugar is still a luxury, and medieval dentistry is basically carpentry with pliers. But everyone tries. The weekly bath is approaching, and preparations begin days in advance. Because contrary to what future historians will claim, medieval people bathe regularly. They bathe socially. They bathe enthusiastically. They've turned bathing into an art form that makes your modern quick shower look like barbarism. London has 18 public bathhouses, or stews as they're called. Paris has 32. Every major city across Europe has dozens. These aren't just functional washing facilities, they're social clubs, restaurants, entertainment venues, and yes, sometimes brothels. But that's not their primary purpose, despite what the church claims. Your favourite bathhouse is a 5-minute walk from home. The building is 3 stories high, with the ground floor for undressing, the second for bathing, and the third for. Well, what happens on the 3rd floor depends on how much you're willing to pay, and how flexible your interpretation of bathing is. You arrive mid-morning when the crowds are smaller and the water is cleanest. The attendant greets you by name. You're a regular now, part of the community. The changing room is warm, heated by the same furnaces that warm the water. Wooden lockers line the walls, and there's an attendant whose entire job is guarding belongings. Medieval people may love bathing, but they also love stealing unattended purses. The bathing room proper is a revelation to anyone who thinks medieval meant primitive. 6 large wooden tubs, each big enough for 4 people, filled with hot water that's changed every few hours. Fresh herbs float on the surface. Lavender today, sometimes rosemary or sage. Steam rises from the water, scented and inviting. But here's where medieval bathing gets interesting. It's communal, mixed sex, completely normal. You slip into a tub already occupied by a merchant's wife you know slightly, and her teenage daughter. No one blinks. Nudity in the bathhouse is like nudity in a doctor's office, contextually appropriate and non-sexual. Well, mostly non-sexual. Those 3rd floor rooms exist for a reason. The conversation flows as freely as the wine, because yes, there's wine and food. The bathhouse serves a full menu. You can order everything from bread and cheese to elaborate meals. The merchant's wife is eating roasted chicken while neck deep in lavender-scented water, discussing wool prices between bites. Her daughter is practicing her Latin, conjugating verbs, while her hair floats around her like a halo. Your spouse joins you, after finishing some business, sliding into the tub with the casual ease of someone who's done this weekly their entire life. The 4 of you sit in hot water, eating, drinking, gossiping about neighbours, and complaining about the new tax on imported wine. It's like a modern coffee shop, but everyone's naked and significantly cleaner. The bathing process itself is elaborate. First, you soak. The hot water opens pores, loosens dirt, and relaxes muscles you didn't know were tense. Then comes the scrubbing. Attendants are available with rough cloths and soap. Real soap, made from olive oil or animal fat, mixed with ash. It smells better than it sounds, and works better than you'd expect. Some people bring their own washing implements. Your spouse has a prized possession, a bronze scraper called a strigil, inherited from a grandfather who claimed it was Roman. Whether that's true, or just family mythology, it works wonderfully for scraping away dead skin and medieval life's accumulated grime. The merchant's wife produces a vial of rose oil, sharing it generously. Scented oils are the height of luxury, imported from the East or made locally by monks who've preserved ancient perfume recipes. You work it into your skin, feeling decidedly unmedieval. If this is the Dark Ages, someone forgot to tell the bathhouse. Hair washing is its own ritual. Medieval hair care involves various mixtures: egg whites for shine, vinegar for cleanliness, herbs for scent. Your hair is washed, rinsed, washed again, then treated with whatever concoction you favour. The merchant's daughter uses chamomile water to maintain her blonde colour. Your spouse prefers rosemary oil, claiming it prevents baldness. You've adopted a honey and beer mixture that makes your hair soft but attracts bees in summer. The social aspect of communal bathing can't be overstated. Business deals are negotiated in these tubs. Marriages are arranged. Gossip is shared. Political alliances form over shared soap. The bathhouse is where medieval society, literally and figuratively, lets its hair down. Different cities have different bathing cultures. The Germans, God bless them, have elevated bathing to an art form. Their bathhouses feature something called bath feasting, elaborate meals served in the tubs. Imagine a formal dinner party, but everyone's nude and pruning. In Nuremberg, the bathhouses are practically palaces, with multiple rooms for different water temperatures, steam rooms, and professional bath attendants who've trained for years. The Italians maintain the old Roman traditions. Their bathhouses often incorporate ancient Roman ruins, bathing in the same pools where Caesar might have soaked. They've preserved classical bathing texts and take the medical benefits of bathing seriously. An Italian physician would prescribe specific bathing regimens for different ailments: cold water for fevers, hot water for joint pain, alternating temperatures for circulation. The Scandinavians, particularly the Vikings, put everyone else to shame. They bathe weekly without fail, which Anglo-Saxon chroniclers find suspiciously excessive. One English writer complained bitterly that Viking men were stealing all the English women because they combed their hair daily, bathed every Saturday, and regularly changed their woolen garments. The horror! Clean men with good hygiene. No wonder English women were interested. Spanish bathing culture, influenced by centuries of Moorish rule, includes elaborate hammam-style bathhouses with multiple rooms of increasing heat. The process involves sweating, scrubbing, and soaking in sequence. Even after the Christian reconquest, these bathing traditions persist, though the church eyes them suspiciously. Back in your London bathhouse, the morning crowd is arriving. A group of apprentices, given a rare day off, tumble in with the chaotic energy of teenage boys everywhere. They're quickly separated into different tubs by a long-suffering attendant who's seen it all. A priest enters, carefully not making eye contact with anyone, and heads for a private tub in the corner. Even clergy need to bathe, though they prefer to pretend otherwise. The bathhouse also serves medical functions. A section is reserved for therapeutic bathing. People with skin conditions soak in herbal waters. Those with aching joints sit in the hottest tubs. Women recovering from childbirth have specific bathing prescriptions. There's even a special tub for treating French pox, syphilis, though whether mercury-infused water helps or harms is debatable. You've been soaking for nearly 2 hours now. Your skin is pink and soft, your hair clean and scented, your muscles relaxed. The merchant's wife and daughter have moved on to the cooling room, where bathers rest on benches, wrapped in linen sheets, continuing conversations begun in the water. This is the part Renaissance historians will conveniently forget. These elaborate bathing rituals, these temples to cleanliness, these social institutions that rival anything in classical Rome, by the time the Renaissance rolls around, these bathhouses will be closed. Syphilis, arriving in 1495, will terrify people into avoiding communal water. Medical theories will shift, claiming that hot water opens pores to disease. The Reformation will condemn bathhouses as dens of sin. Future centuries will point to this bathhouse closure as evidence that medieval people were always filthy. They'll ignore the centuries of enthusiastic bathing that came before. They'll pretend the Renaissance invented cleanliness while actually destroying a 1,000-year tradition of communal hygiene. But for now, in 1347, the bathhouses thrive. You and your spouse move to the cooling room, joining the merchant family. Someone has brought a chess set, because what else would you do while cooling off from your bath? Your spouse, who claims to be excellent at chess, immediately loses to the merchant's daughter. Education clearly includes strategic thinking along with Latin conjugation. The conversation turns, as it often does, to hygiene in general. Everyone has opinions. The merchant's wife believes in washing bed linens monthly, extravagant by some standards, normal by others. Your spouse advocates for rush flooring changed seasonally, mixed with herbs to freshen the air. You've adopted your mother's practice of hanging lavender bundles in wardrobes and strewing mint on floors. Personal hygiene extends beyond bathing. Everyone carries wash basins in their homes. Morning and evening ablutions are standard. Hands are washed before meals, a practical necessity when you eat with your fingers. Even the poorest households maintain basic cleanliness. It's a matter of health, certainly, but also social standing. Smell bad in medieval England, and you'll find yourself very lonely very quickly. The myths about medieval filthiness will come from many sources. Protestant reformers needing to demonize Catholic traditions. Renaissance writers creating a dark Middle Age to make their own era shine brighter. Victorian historians projecting their own prudish horror at communal bathing. Each generation will add to the myth until it becomes accepted fact. But sitting here in your bathhouse, clean and content, surrounded by equally clean medieval people, the future's lies don't matter. You know the truth. Your ancestors bathed. They bathed often. They bathed together. They made it a social event, a medical treatment, a pleasure and an art. Your hair smells of honey and herbs. Your skin is soft with rose oil. Your spouse is losing another chess game to a teenager. The merchant's wife is planning next week's bath. She's heard the bathhouse is getting new oils from Constantinople. This is your dark age. Warm, scented, and surprisingly hygienic. The Renaissance can keep its paintings. You'll take your medieval bathhouse any day. 6 months into marriage, and your luck has run out. You've developed what the physician delicately calls a burning in your private passages. Your spouse, loyal to a fault, admits to similar symptoms. In medieval London, where bathhouses double as brothels, and medical understanding of disease transmission is roughly on par with astrology, sexually transmitted infections are as common as rain and significantly less pleasant. The good news? Medieval medicine takes sexual health seriously. The bad news? Medieval medicine's solutions might kill you faster than the disease. You visit Dr. Wilhelm again, because apparently he's your physician for life now. He examines you with the professional detachment of someone who sees genital disasters daily. His diagnosis is swift. Burning sickness, known in your time as gonorrhea. It's been around since ancient times, and medieval physicians have developed extensive treatments. Whether those treatments work is another question entirely. The good news, he says, preparing his instruments, is that this is not the French disease. The French disease, syphilis, won't arrive in Europe for another 148 years, but when it does, it will make your burning sickness look like a mild inconvenience. For now, you're dealing with one of the classic, sexually transmitted infections that medieval people know well. The examination is thorough and mortifying. Dr. Wilhelm peers at your affected areas with a magnifying glass that probably doesn't magnify anything correctly. He asks about symptoms. Burning during urination? Yes. Unusual discharge? Unfortunately, yes. Fever mild? And whether you've noticed any unusual planetary alignments lately? What? Medieval physicians believe STIs are caused by various factors: corrupted humours, astrological influences, poisoned partners, or divine punishment. Dr. Wilhelm, educated and pragmatic, leans toward the corrupted humours theory with a side of poor planetary timing. Venus was in the wrong house when you conceived, apparently. You don't mention that you haven't conceived anything except regret. The treatment begins immediately, and it's a medieval horror show of good intentions and terrible science. First comes the mercury. Sweet Christ, the mercury. Dr. Wilhelm produces a collection of vials containing various mercury preparations. There's mercury mixed with honey to make it palatable, mercury in wine to make it drinkable, and pure liquid mercury for the truly desperate. Mercury is the universal cure for sexual ailments in medieval medicine. The fact that it's also a deadly poison seems to escape everyone's notice. We'll start with fumigation, he announces, setting up what looks like a torture device, but is actually a medical chair. You're instructed to sit naked over a pot of burning mercury compounds while wrapped in heavy cloths. The theory is that mercury vapours will enter your body and drive out the disease. The reality is that you're slowly poisoning yourself while feeling like you're being cooked alive. The fumigation lasts an hour. An hour of breathing toxic fumes while your physician explains the benefits of mercury therapy. It clears corrupted humours. It purges bad blood. It realigns your body's natural channels. It's also causing your gums to bleed, but that's apparently a sign it's working. Next comes the topical treatment. Mercury ointment is applied directly to the affected areas. It burns worse than the infection itself, but Dr. Wilhelm assures you this is good. The burning means it's fighting the disease, he says, applying more ointment with disturbing enthusiasm. You're not sure if the treatment or the disease is worse at this point. But mercury is just the beginning. Medieval medicine has an entire arsenal of STI treatments, each more creatively horrible than the last. There's the dietary restrictions. No hot foods, they inflame the passion. No cold foods, they congeal the humours. No wet foods, they encourage discharge. And no dry foods, they prevent healing. You're basically left with lukewarm porridge and regret. Wine is forbidden, ale is discouraged, and water should be boiled with specific herbs that taste like punishment. The herbal treatments are marginally better. Sage tea for cleansing, parsley root for urinary health, and something called virgin's mantle that definitely doesn't come from virgins but might come from a plant. These are brewed into teas, mixed into pessaries, or applied as poultices. They smell terrible, taste worse, but at least they're not actively poisonous like the mercury. Your spouse is receiving similar treatment, though with some gender-specific variations. Men get additional treatments involving urethral irrigation. Yes, exactly what it sounds like. A thin metal tube is inserted, and various solutions are poured directly into the urethra. The screaming can be heard 3 houses away. Women receive vaginal fumigations with herbs, and of course, more mercury. The physician also prescribes bloodletting, because medieval medicine's answer to everything is either mercury or removing blood, sometimes both. The theory is that bad blood causes disease, so removing it helps. The practice involves leeches placed in strategic locations that you'd rather not think about. The leeches are at least preferable to the alternative. cutting veins near the affected areas. Throughout all this, Dr. Wilhelm maintains a running commentary on sexual health in medieval London. The bathhouses, he confirms, are breeding grounds for disease. But so are taverns, markets, churches, and basically anywhere humans gather. The Winchester geese, the bishop's prostitutes, are regularly inspected for burning sickness and banned from work if infected. This is one of the few public health measures that actually makes sense, though enforcement is spotty at best. He tells you about other sexual ailments he treats. There's the French disease, any STI the English want to blame on France, the Spanish pox, any STI the French want to blame on Spain, and the Neapolitan sickness, any STI everyone wants to blame on Italy. National pride extends even to venereal diseases. There are conditions you've never heard of and hope never to experience. Proud flesh involves genital warts treated with burning caustic substances. Yard canker affects men in ways that make strong physicians weep. Mother's grief causes infertility in women and is treated with prayers and pessaries made from mouse droppings. Every ailment has a name, a treatment, and a mortality rate nobody discusses. A week into treatment, and you're not sure if you're getting better or just getting used to the constant discomfort. The mercury has made your teeth loose and your breath metallic. The herbal teas have turned your urine interesting colours. The dietary restrictions have left you constantly hungry, but the burning has decreased slightly, which Dr. Wilhelm takes as complete vindication of his methods. He adjusts the treatment. Less mercury fumigation, thank God, more herbal applications. He prescribes something called Saracen ointment, supposedly derived from Arab medical texts. It contains frankincense, myrrh, and ingredients he won't name, but which smell suspiciously like ground beetles. You apply it dutifully. At this point, you'd rub yourself with actual beetles if it meant avoiding more mercury. The social aspects of having an STI in medieval times are surprisingly manageable. There's no real stigma. These diseases are too common. Your neighbours know you're ill. The mercury breath is distinctive, but they're sympathetic rather than judgmental. The baker's wife recommends her own remedy involving oak bark and prayer. The butcher mentions his cousin recovered from burning sickness using only holy water and positive thinking. Everyone has a story, a cure, a relative who survived something worse. Your spouse handles the situation with medieval pragmatism. You're both infected, you're both being treated, and blame is pointless. Whether the infection came from a bathhouse, a contaminated privy seat, a popular theory, or actual infidelity doesn't matter. You're in this together, comparing mercury burns and sharing herbal teas. The treatment continues for a month. A month of twice-weekly physician visits, daily applications of increasingly exotic ointments, and so much mercury your chamber pot could probably be used as a mirror. The burning sickness gradually retreats, whether from treatment or natural recovery, nobody can say. Dr. Wilhelm declares you cured, though he recommends preventive mercury fumigations monthly. You politely decline. You've had enough mercury to last several lifetimes, however long those might be, after this treatment. He provides parting advice on preventing future infections. Avoid the bathhouses on Saturdays, too crowded. Never share washing cloths. Inspect potential partners for visible symptoms. Though he admits this is challenging in candlelight and impractical in passion, he suggests carrying protective amulets, avoiding sex during certain lunar phases, and praying to Saint Fiacre, patron saint of venereal diseases. The fact that venereal diseases have their own patron saint tells you everything about medieval sexual health. You leave his office poorer, possibly sicker from the cure than the disease, but officially treated. Your spouse waits outside, comparing notes with another patient about mercury alternatives. Apparently, there's a new physician who uses gold instead of mercury. It's equally ineffective, but less toxic, and significantly more expensive. Walking home, you pass the bathhouses that may or may not have been the source of your troubles. They're busy as always, steam rising from the windows, laughter echoing from within. You'll go back eventually. Cleanliness is too important to sacrifice for fear. But maybe you'll bring your own washing cloths, and definitely avoid Saturdays. The apothecary is your next stop. The aftermath of mercury treatment requires its own medications. Herbs for your damaged gums, tonics for your poisoned system, and something to settle your stomach that's been in constant revolt since the fumigations began. The apothecary, used to post-mercury patients, has a standard package prepared. He throws in free advice about sexual health. Certain herbs taken daily can prevent disease. They can't. Washing with vinegar after intercourse helps. It might, actually. Never have relations during thunderstorms as lightning curdles the sexual humours. What? His theories are no more scientific than the physician's, but at least his remedies won't kill you. 6 weeks after diagnosis, you're officially recovered. The burning sickness is gone, though whether it was vanquished by medicine or simply ran its course remains unclear. You've survived medieval STI treatment, which is an accomplishment in itself. Many don't. Your marriage has survived too, strengthened by the shared ordeal of mercury, fumigation, and herbal pessaries. Nothing says for better or worse like comparing treatment burns and scheduling your bloodletting appointments together. You've learned important lessons. Medieval medicine is enthusiastic, creative, and occasionally accidentally effective. Mercury is not your friend. Sexual health in the Middle Ages is a constant negotiation between desire, disease, and truly terrible medical theories. But you've also learned that humans adapt, that communities support each other through embarrassing ailments, that physicians do their best with dangerously limited knowledge, that love, or at least partnership, can survive burning sickness and mercury breath. Your spouse suggests celebrating your recovery with a visit to the bathhouse. You agree, though you'll definitely bring your own washing cloths, and maybe some of that protective vinegar, and absolutely no activities that might require another round of Dr. Wilhelm's mercury chair. Medieval sexual health, where the cure is worse than the disease, but at least you suffer together. 1 year into marriage, and you face the inevitable medieval woman's dilemma. You're probably pregnant. Again. The first pregnancy ended in a reasonably healthy baby who survived the crucial first year, a minor miracle in 1348. But your body has barely recovered, and here you are, missing your monthly courses and feeling that familiar nausea that means another 9 months of growing a human while trying to run a household. This is the reality for medieval women. Constant pregnancy from marriage until death or menopause, whichever comes first. Your mother had 12 children. 7 survived to adulthood. She spent roughly 15 years of her life pregnant, not counting miscarriages. The math is terrifying when you think about it too hard. But here's the open secret of medieval life. Women have been preventing and ending pregnancies since Eve figured out what caused them. The church condemns it. Physicians officially discourage it. But everyone knows someone who can help. The village wise woman, the Italian merchant who imports herbs for women's troubles, the midwife who knows which teas bring on delayed courses. You're not ready for another pregnancy. Your body hasn't recovered, Your household can barely support one child, and frankly, you'd like to survive long enough to see the one you have reach adulthood. So begins your education in medieval birth control, a curriculum that ranges from surprisingly effective to laughably useless to genuinely dangerous. Your first teacher is your aunt, who's had only 4 children despite 20 years of marriage. She pulls you aside after Sunday dinner, recognizing the green tinge to your complexion and the way you refuse the pickled fish. "Come to my house tomorrow," she says quietly. "Bring coin. Tell no one." Her home smells of herbs and secrecy. She shows you her collection: pennyroyal, rue, savin, tansy, herbs that bring on delayed courses in careful doses and cause worse in desperate ones. She teaches you the measurements, the preparations, the prayers to mutter while brewing, because God might forgive what he doesn't officially notice. Small amounts, she stresses, showing you dried leaves that look harmless but aren't. Too much, and you'll bring on more than your courses. Too much, and you won't need to worry about children ever again. She also shows you the barrier methods. A sea sponge soaked in vinegar, inserted before the act. Pessaries made of wool and crocodile dung, though she admits finding crocodile dung in London is challenging, so most women use honey and cedar resin instead. Beeswax shaped into a cap. None are foolproof, but they're better than nothing. Your education continues at the apothecary, where women's herbs are sold with a wink and no questions. Queen Anne's lace seeds, chewed daily. Modern science will later prove these actually work as contraception, but you just know they taste terrible and seem to help. Willow bark tea, which thins the blood and sometimes prevents implantation. Mercury, because of course there's mercury, though most women are smart enough to avoid that particular cure. The mechanical methods are more entertaining than effective. Jumping backward 7 times after intercourse, supposedly to dislodge the seed. Sneezing while squatting. Having the man urinate immediately after to cool his seed. One book recommends the woman hold her breath during the act, cross her legs afterward, and think very hard about not conceiving. The power of positive thinking, medieval style. Then there are the amulets. Dear God, the amulets. Weasel testicles are the most famous. The right testicle of a weasel, removed while the animal is alive, wrapped in silk, and worn around the neck. The fact that accurately determining weasel gender and surgically removing specific testicles requires skills most people don't possess doesn't stop anyone from trying. Other amulets include a child's caul, the membrane some babies are born with, the earwax of a mule, specifically a sterile mule because symbolism matters, the bone from the right side of a black cat, killed at midnight under a full moon, and the ashes of a male frog burned alive while copulating. You're starting to think medieval people had very specific feelings about small animals. Your neighbour swears by asparagus, not eating it, wearing it. A dried asparagus root tied to the thigh during intercourse. Another woman recommends placing a magnet under the bed to repel male seed. The blacksmith's wife claims eating bees, whole bees, prevents pregnancy, though she has 6 children, so perhaps her recipe needs work. The most disturbing method involves infanticide by proxy. Some women keep male ferrets, believing that the ferret's natural tendency to eat its young will transfer to them, causing their wombs to reject conception. The logic is frightening, the practice is bizarre, and the ferrets are probably just confused. But between the ridiculous and the dangerous, some methods actually work. The rhythm method, though not called that, is understood by observant women. They know their fertile days, even if they explain it in terms of lunar cycles and bodily humours. Coitus interruptus is practiced despite church condemnation. The sin of Onan is preferable to another mouth to feed. Prolonged breastfeeding provides some protection, and medieval women nurse their children for years when possible. Noble women who use wet nurses have babies annually. Peasant women who nurse their own might have them every 2 or 3 years. The correlation is obvious to everyone except the people writing medical texts. Your aunt's herbs work too well. The delayed courses arrive with violence that sends you to bed for 3 days. Your husband, bless him, asks no questions and brings honey wine. The relief of not being pregnant overwhelms the guilt of whatever you've just done. The church would call it murder. You call it survival. Dr. Wilhelm, during your next consultation, delicately mentions family planning. Officially, he can't provide contraceptive advice. Unofficially, he suggests certain healthful practices that happen to prevent conception. Regular purging, which makes you too sick for intercourse. Cold baths, which supposedly freeze the seed. Sleeping in separate beds during your hot days, when you're most fertile, though he phrases it differently. He also mentions, academically of course, that certain positions make conception less likely, that wine consumed before intercourse weakens seed, that violent sneezing afterward helps. He's giving you contraceptive advice while maintaining plausible deniability, medieval medical ethics at their finest. The midwife network is where real knowledge lives. These women have delivered hundreds of babies and prevented thousands more. They know which herbs bring on bleeding, which pessaries block seed, which positions help or hinder conception. They pass this knowledge woman to woman, whispered over birthing beds and shared through coded recipes. Your midwife, Joan, is particularly talented. She's delivered your first child and quietly prevented several more. Her methods combine practical knowledge with psychological comfort. The herbs she prescribes work, but so does the ritual of taking them, the sense of control over your own body in an age when women control almost nothing. She teaches you to read your body's signs. The changes in your monthly discharge that signal fertility. The breast tenderness that means conception might have occurred. The subtle symptoms that distinguish pregnancy from illness. Knowledge is power, even if it's hidden knowledge. The economics of contraception create their own challenges. Effective herbs are expensive. The apothecary charges more for women's troubles, remedies, than for standard medicines. A good pessary requires materials, sea sponges, beeswax, oils that cost money. Poor women rely on free but dangerous methods: lead, contaminated water, violent purgatives, physical trauma. Your household account books, if anyone looked closely, would reveal the truth. Regular purchases of herbs for female complaints, payments to midwives for consultation, money spent on imported sponges that never appear in your kitchen. You hide these expenses among household remedies, hoping your husband either doesn't notice or chooses not to comment. He chooses not to comment. Whether from ignorance, indifference, or quiet support, he never questions the herbs, the midwife visits, or the mysterious ailments that keep you in separate beds during certain times. Perhaps he's done his own math, calculated the cost of children against a merchant's income. Perhaps he simply trusts your judgment. Perhaps he enjoys the sex without consequences as much as you do. The social dynamics around contraception are complex. Women share knowledge, but maintain plausible deniability. I've heard, they say, never I've done. Recipes are passed as general health tonics that happen to regulate courses. Shopping lists include contraceptive herbs, mixed with cooking ingredients. The Church's position creates impossible contradictions. Sex without procreation is sinful, but so is denying your husband his marital rights. Having too many children is irresponsible, but preventing them is murder. Women navigate these contradictions daily, confessing to lesser sins while hiding greater ones. Your confessor, Father Thomas, takes a pragmatic approach. He assigns light penances for avoiding the marital debt and doesn't ask follow-up questions. Either he's remarkably naive or remarkably wise. You suspect the latter. He's seen too many women die in childbirth, too many families destroyed by too many mouths to feed. The noble women have their own methods, mostly involving separate bedrooms and convenient headaches. When you must conceive, for dynastic reasons, you do. When you mustn't, for survival reasons, you don't. The Queen of England, after providing sufficient heirs, develops mysterious ailments that require separate quarters. Everyone understands. But for merchant wives like you, the balance is harder. You need heirs, but not too many. You need to survive childbirth, but still please your husband. You need contraception that works, but won't kill you. It's a deadly serious game of chance, played with herbs and hope. 2 years into marriage now, 1 living child, 2 prevented pregnancies, and a growing knowledge of your body's rhythms. You've learned which herbs help and which harm. You've invested in good sponges and reliable suppliers. You've found the balance between church law and natural law. Your aunt nods approvingly when you visit. You're learning the ancient dance of women's survival, not the steps they teach in dancing lessons, the other ones. When to conceive, when to prevent, when to end what's begun. The knowledge that keeps women alive in a world that treats them as breeding stock. Your husband's business thrives, partly because you're not constantly pregnant. You can help with accounts, manage the household efficiently, even travel to markets. 1 healthy child with the possibility of more when you're ready. It's revolutionary in its ordinariness. The herbs hang drying in your kitchen, mixed with cooking ingredients. Anyone looking sees a well-stocked household. You see freedom. Temporary, fragile freedom bought with bitter teas and vinegar-soaked sponges, but freedom nonetheless. Medieval birth control, where weasel testicles compete with actual science, and women's survival depends on knowing the difference. 3 years married, and you've finally figured it out. The secret. The thing no troubadour sings about, no priest preaches, no physician prescribes. The truth about love in medieval times is that it exists in the spaces between the rules, grows in the cracks of institution, and flourishes despite everyone's best efforts to regulate it into extinction. Your revelation comes on an ordinary Tuesday, one of the few days the Church actually allows marital relations bless their regulatory hearts. You're reconciling household accounts with your spouse, arguing about the price of imported cloth, when you realize you're happy. Not ecstatic, not swooning with passion, just happy, content, amused by your spouse's terrible mathematics and their stubborn insistence that 7 times 8 equals 54. This isn't the love the troubadours describe. There's no pining, no suffering, no elaborate metaphors about roses and flames. You haven't written any poetry about your spouse's eyes, mainly because they're a perfectly ordinary brown, and you're terrible at rhyming. You don't threaten to die without their favour, because you're too busy living with their snoring. But somewhere between the disastrous wedding night and today's mathematical arguments, you've built something real. A partnership that survives mercury treatments and wandering wombs, 44 approved sexual days per year, and your mother-in-law's opinions about everything. If that's not love, it's at least a successful merger. The myths about medieval sexuality surround you daily. Walk through London, and you'll hear them all. Peasants rutting like animals in the fields, nobles practicing courtly love, while their marriages rot, everyone filthy and diseased and miserable. The reality, as you've learned, is far more complex and surprisingly familiar. Take your neighbours, the baker and his wife. Married 15 years, 6 children, and they still laugh at each other's jokes. She helps in the shop, he helps with the children, and on Sunday afternoons they walk together by the Thames, holding hands like young lovers. No dramatic passion, no poetic suffering, just 2 people who've figured out how to like each other after a decade and a half of yeast and babies. Or consider the noble couple you sometimes see at church. Lord Robert and Lady Isabel, married for politics when she was 14 and he was 30. By all accounts, it should be miserable. But watch them together, how she straightens his cloak without thinking, how he saves the best cushion for her bad back. 20 years have transformed a business arrangement into something resembling affection. Not love, perhaps, but a functional approximation. Even the prostitutes, the Winchester geese in their yellow hoods, have their own version of romance. Your maid knows one who's been seeing the same merchant for 5 years. He pays for her time, yes, but also brings her ribbons, asks about her family, remembers her birthday. It's transactional, but also tender, breaking all the rules about what relationships should be. The church's bizarre relationship with sexuality creates unintended spaces for actual intimacy. When you can only have sex on 44 days a year, those days become special by default. When every physical encounter requires checking the calendar, consulting the priest, and avoiding numerous prohibitions, the encounters you do have carry more weight. Your spouse and you have developed your own rhythm within the restrictions. Tuesdays are good days, usually allowed and far enough from Sunday to avoid accidental holiness. You've learned to read the liturgical calendar like farmers read weather patterns. Looks like a clear week ahead, minimal saints' days, no major feasts. We should make hay while the sun shines. Except you're not making hay. The medical beliefs about sex, bizarre as they are, accidentally promote some healthy practices. The emphasis on female pleasure, necessary for conception, remember, means medieval husbands are technically required to satisfy their wives. The belief that retained seed causes madness gives men medical permission to seek regular release. The wandering womb theory, ridiculous as it is, acknowledges that women have sexual needs. Your physician, Dr. Wilhelm, has become oddly progressive in his old age. His latest theory involves marital harmony as essential for health. Regular intercourse, within approved days, mutual pleasure, and emotional compatibility all contribute to balanced humours. He's basically prescribing a happy marriage as medical treatment. It's revolutionary wrapped in medieval medical nonsense. The contraception knowledge you've gained has transformed your marriage. No longer terrified of constant pregnancy, you can actually enjoy physical intimacy. Your spouse has become an enthusiastic participant in calendar management and herbal procurement. Nothing says marital teamwork like coordinating your birth control strategies. The public nature of medieval life, which seemed so horrifying at first, has unexpected benefits. Everyone knows everyone's business, but that also means everyone supports each other. When your neighbour miscarries, the women rally with herbs and comfort. When the blacksmith's wife throws him out for adultery, he finds his belongings in the street and his credit mysteriously dried up. Community enforcement has its advantages. Your marriage has survived its trials. The public bedding ceremony that seemed like torture is now a funny story you tell at other weddings. The mercury treatments brought you closer through shared suffering. The wandering womb diagnosis led to some creative medical solutions you both still laugh about. Even your mother-in-law has mellowed, mainly because your successful contraception means she's not overrun with grandchildren. The economic partnership of marriage, so unromantic in theory, works surprisingly well in practice. You manage the household accounts while your spouse handles the merchant business. You've developed complementary skills, shared goals, mutual respect. It's not poetry, but it pays the bills and occasionally produces genuine affection. Physical attraction, that thing the church fears and poets worship, has its place too. 3 years of marriage have taught you each other's preferences, rhythms, desires. Within the narrow constraints of approved positions and permitted days, you found variety and pleasure. The human body, it turns out, is creative when given limitations. The myths persist because they're easier than reality. It's simpler to imagine medieval people as either romantically pure or sexually depraved than to acknowledge they were just people navigating desire and duty like everyone else. The virgin, whore dichotomy, is neater than the merchant's wife who prevents pregnancies while loving her husband and raising healthy children. Your friend Margaret represents the complexity perfectly. Married at 16 to a man she'd never met, she spent the first year crying. The second year, she discovered he was kind, if boring. The third year, she took a lover, the exciting but unreliable son of a wine merchant. Now, in year 5, she settled into an arrangement everyone pretends not to know about. Her husband has his own interests, her lover provides excitement, her children are probably legitimate, and everyone's reasonably content. Is it ideal? No. Is it love? Partially. Is it survival? Absolutely. The troubadours with their songs of impossible love have it backward. Real love isn't about suffering for an unattainable ideal. It's about attaining a sustainable reality. It's your spouse bringing you ginger tea during morning sickness. It's coordinating your sexual calendar to avoid feast days. It's laughing at the same joke about your uncle's toupee for the 100th time. Medieval love is pragmatic but not loveless, regulated but not passionless, public but not shameless. It exists in the gap between what's prescribed and what's possible, between church law and human nature, between the ideal and the achievable. Your spouse finds you in the garden one evening, frustrated with the household accounts. The numbers won't balance, the servants are feuding, and your mother-in-law has opinions about your herb garden that sound suspiciously like contraception suspicions. You're ready to throw the ledger in the Thames and become a nun, though you'd probably be terrible at celibacy. They sit beside you, read the accounts, find your error, you transpose 2 numbers, and make a terrible joke about mathematical conception that somehow makes you laugh. They suggest hiring your cousin as a clerk, promise to handle your mother-in-law, and offer to help reorganize the herb garden to look less suspicious. It's not a grand romantic gesture. No one's writing songs about accounting errors and herbal camouflage, but it's partnership, support, shared humour in the face of life's absurdities. It's love, medieval style. The sun sets over London, painting the Thames gold and briefly making the city beautiful. Church bells ring for Vespers, announcing another day survived. Your spouse takes your hand, calloused from work but gentle in its grip. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, deliveries to manage, servants to supervise, your mother-in-law to deflect, contraception to coordinate. But tonight, you sit in your garden with someone who knows your worst qualities and chooses to stay anyway. Someone who's seen you through mercury treatments and wandering wombs, public bedding and private disappointments. Someone who can't multiply 7 by 8, but remembers how you take your ale. Medieval love. It's not what the stories promised, but it's what works. And in a world of arranged marriages and 44 approved days, what works is its own kind of miracle. You lean against your spouse's shoulder, watching the city settle into evening. Somewhere, Lord William is probably serenading Lady Margaret with his terrible lute. Somewhere, couples are checking their calendars and brewing their herbs. Somewhere, the myths of medieval sexuality are being simultaneously reinforced and shattered by ordinary people living ordinary lives. But here in your garden, with your error-prone accounts and your camouflage contraception and your mathematically challenged but emotionally supportive spouse, you've found something better than myth. You've found a love that survives reality. And in medieval England, that's the greatest achievement of all.